We humans have come up with different ways to invoke and explore fear, as well as use it as a tool for reflection, and that's the genre of horror. From cosmic horror to sci-fi horror, there are various subgenres that explore different questions and perhaps even insecurities or taboos. They titillate, educate, and entertain. Amongst the various offerings of the horror genre, we have Satanic Horror. As the name suggests, these movies often feature Satan or the Christian devil as a character and can be populated by other figures from the Christian mythos, like the Antichrist. They also explore common horror tropes such as witches and possession. In this video, dear fans, we'd like to introduce you to 15 satanic horror movies from the 70s that'll have you clutching your cross at night. Allons-y! Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. Now, this is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The Omen. Released in 1976, The Omen is the story of Damien, the Antichrist, and the struggles of Robert, the man who raises him and accepts that. Well, that's a bit wrong because it's so much more than that. Damien was secretly taken by Robert after his own child died during childbirth, and Damien's birth mother died while giving birth. Catherine and Robert then raised Damien, only for mysterious and horrific things to start happening after Damien's 5th birthday, which causes the local priest to warn Robert that his son might be the Antichrist and would kill his wife next. The priest soon dies after a rod falls on him, and with a photographer, Robert goes to investigate Damien's birth, which leads him to realize that Damien is indeed the spawn of Satan, but he still refuses to kill the child until his wife and the photographer are killed. Yet, before he can fulfill his task, police shoot him dead. The movie ends with Damien smiling at the camera, and we continue to follow his exploits in the sequels that follow. The idea of the movie is based on the Christian Antichrist archetype, which many have done. So, what makes it special, and why should you watch it? Well, fans have said that there are some great nasty surprises that'll have you reeling, and Damien is crafty as well as creepy in his exploits, as befitting the genre, I think. The chase from the cemetery, where Damien's origins are revealed, and which includes a pack of Rottweilers, is one of the best scenes of the movie, according to fans. And well, if you love the Antichrist genre filled with dialogue that'll have you shaking your head, then give this one a chance. The Antichrist. This is one Italian horror movie that has a split. On the one hand, we love stories with a female protagonist, but this also has strong instances of simply traumatizing the woman for the plot. But that could be a narrow view based on what we've read about the movie. So why don't you see it for yourself and tell us what happens in this movie, you ask? Well, it follows Ippolita, who was in an accident that caused her mom to die, and since then, Ippolita has been paralyzed. Over the years, she's become overly attached to her father, who's her primary caregiver, and is distressed by his having a girlfriend. She goes to the church for help, where she's directed to a secular psychology professional who uses hypnosis to reveal her previous life, which he feels is unconsciously affecting her, alongside the trauma from the accident and watching her mother die. Here, Ippolita is possessed by her ancestor, who was a witch burned at the stake. She'd made a deal with the devil, but renounced him at the last moment and thus managed to protect her soul. The devil eventually, after some incestuous sexual exploits, reveals that he intends to finish the deal with Ippolita and have her give birth to the Antichrist. The church, waiting so far on instructions from the Vatican, finally gets the green light to perform an exorcism, which appears to save the girl from the devil and his son. Now, why do fans watch this movie? Let's hear from them. Well, despite the second half being eerily similar to the blockbuster we'll look at next, The Exorcist, fans have called the film visually gorgeous, praising especially the use of the color palette and lavish interior set design. So perhaps that's the appeal, alongside impactful close-ups and the satanic horror elements that became a cash grab with
"It is he who commands you! He who flung you from the heights of..."
The Exorcist. This is the story of a girl possessed by a demon, but it starts with the mummy. Okay, no more jokes, but yep, the movie starts with an archaeological dig where a figurine is uncovered. Spoiler alert, this'll be our main antagonist. And yeah, we're also getting vibes of the start of the Suicide Squad movie's antagonist. Fans praise this movie for showing the parent-child dynamic in a wholesome light, making us care about the young girl who gets possessed. Tips for any writers in the audience: please make your readers care about your characters like this movie did with Regan. And despite the extremely slow pacing of the film, as well as some obvious plot holes, like blaming a shaking bed on a child's mental illness because that isn't demonized enough already, this movie still made the big bucks. Is it the gory details? The great visuals of demonic possession, which fans love, could probably excuse the terrible medical writing, but at least we get a psychiatrist who is good, right, and he's even a priest, which leads us to believe he'll perform the exorcism. Yeah, today, the movie might feel extremely predictable, but this movie did set up some of the rules for satanic horror with its blockbuster success. Trust me, the possession scenes are capital S scary. The ending, even worse, because here's the thing. Father Merrin, the archaeologist from the start of the movie, and Karras, the psychiatric priest, perform the exorcism together. Merrin dies and Karras is tormented, losing his composure and demanding the demon leave the child and possess him, which leads to the demon taking him over and then Karras tumbling to his death. While Regan is healed, it's implied she must keep Karras' medallion of priesthood with her, always. And one must wonder, did the devil die with Karras, or is the demon free now? Honestly, simply writing about the movie is scaring me, so this is a must-watch watch next All Hallows Eve, as is the next movie on the list because the ending of that one made me fear for my hairy soul. The Devil's Reign. If you're looking to watch a movie that'll have you jumping at the slightest sound, this could be it. A Satanist cult going after a family that holds a book containing the source of their power is the least of our protagonist's worries. No, Tom should be scared of the end. He thinks he's defeated the cult and has managed to escape with his wife, but in reality, his wife's body is taken over by the cult leader while her soul is trapped in a bottle called the Devil's Reign. If you like high stakes, adventure, and gore, this could be the movie for you. So, why do fans love it? Well, this movie, apparently funded by a mafia movie, has a great ending, even if the fan base seems divided on the rest of the movie. Others have appreciated the realistic satanic visuals, yet others have focused on the famous actors involved, despite the 70s low-budget vibe the movie appears to give, and yet it has the classic 70s satanic horror elements, making it beloved to those who follow the genre. You know how we mentioned that many satanic horror movies on this list also have a case for using mental illness as part of the plot? Well, the next movie makes it central in a way. Yep, we're talking about 1977's The Sentinel. Fans, riddle me this. Would you move into a brownstone that was a gateway to hell? Well, unfortunately, Allison, an actress with a history of self-harm and attempts, does. There, she meets several weird neighbors, including some who masturbate in front of her. Talk about disturbing. Yet when she asks her landlord, apparently the only other human in the building aside from the blind father, she finds this out. After a series of investigative shenanigans which result in the death of her boyfriend, who cheated on and murdered his wife, Allison discovers the brownstone is the gateway to hell. Now, she has two options. Either become the gatekeeper because she's tried to take her life, which qualifies her for the job, or go to hell. After a struggle with demons who wish to drag her to the depths of hell, Allison becomes Sister Tressa and takes up the job. The movie ends with a new couple moving into the place, showing the cycle continues and a weird divine justice will be served to sinners who hurt others, while those with mental illness will gatekeep hell. I can't even, but fans love this. Or do they? Review time. The movie's been called spectacular, with amazing frames and famous names. Some have even called it an outstanding horror film, but will you be watching it? Tell us in the comments while we move on to the next item on the list. Beyond the Door. 1974's Beyond the Door is another Antichrist movie. It follows the pregnancy of Jessica, which grows more and more violent as time passes. It also progresses at an unnatural rate. This is followed by intense mood swings and demonic behavior, indicating she's probably possessed. Enter Dimitri, a past lover who had made a deal with the devil to save his life, aka Jessica's giving birth to the Antichrist. But it's not wholly on Dimitri because eventually it's revealed he was a pawn in a larger game. The movie ends with Dimitri dying and the baby being stillborn. Yet, the chilling bit, Jessica's older son Ken is implied to be the true Antichrist. What a twist. Now, we might feel it's predictable, but can we say the same for the 70s? Why don't we just ask the fans? Well, some say that the writing and acting are both lacking, with the movie ripping off classics like Rosemary's Baby and the recently released Exorcist. Yet others are calling it extremely entertaining. So I guess the thing is that you'll just have to make your own call on this movie. Some might love it for the familiarity. Others might hate it. We look forward to knowing where you stand. Up next, we have Blood on Satan's Claw. This movie has been called the progenitor of folk horror and gained a cult-like following. But what is the story that got fans so titillated? Well, it's set in rural England where a local farmer discovers what looks like a strange werewolf skull. Before anyone can investigate, the skull vanishes, adding to the mysterious atmosphere. This is when the romantic subplot leads our heroine to the attic because her lover's family disapproved of her. And of course, Rosalind, the heroine, gets possessed, which the family takes as an excuse to get her institutionalized. Now the movie is set in the 19th century, and mental health treatment then wasn't the best. This is where the kids get involved, adding to the disturbing nature of the movie. It's horrific when a child is killed in a deadly game of blind man's bluff and others are marched to a ruined church as part of a demon summoning. This leads to a child, Kathy, being killed ritualistically. Why does satanic horror hate children? But the movie ends happily when, after an investigation, the authorities are able to stop the demon and kill his principal servant, thus saving some of the characters, including Ralph. And yeah, we never do hear of what happens to Rosalind. A fan critic, even when pointing out writing errors and continuity issues, has said that the movie is creepy and at points becomes uncomfortable to watch, which lends to its horror credibility. What do you all think? Will you be watching the Blood on Satan's Claw? Especially with iconic scenes like a woman getting possessed in an attic. The next movie, while still involving Satanists because it is satanic horror, takes place in a much more recent time. It has Texas and motorcycles on a vacation. Shall we? Race with the Devil. Released in 1971, this movie follows two couples whose vacation takes a nasty turn when they witness a satanic ritual and thus become the target of a cult. Do they get out of this alive? Or does their end turn out nasty? Let's get into it. Robert and Frank, along with their wives Kelly and Alice, report the satanic ritual and sacrifice to the sheriff, but something seems fishy, so they decide to carry on to a larger police station, unaware that they're being tailed. The movie contains some excellent chase scenes between the two couples and the cultists, once the cat is out of the bag and the four protagonists know they're being followed. Not only that, but the cult tries various ways to trap them and dupe them, which adds a layer of entertainment and makes us think that these four aren't typical dumb horror protagonists. Maybe they'll survive, you think, until the movie's end. What happens? Well, you need to watch The Race with the Devil and let us know. Until then, we can tell you what other fans, like yourself, have to say about this piece. While some fans have linked it to current politics, others have called the movie's ending perfectly logical, despite attempts to point out flaws. A great horror movie is perhaps one where you know there's no way out for the characters and your hopes against hopes are dashed. So, this one fits the bill. Hey, or does it? Let us know in the comments while we tell you about the 1971 satanic horror movie named The Brotherhood of Satan. Witches, children, satanic cults. This movie has it all, and it maintains a modern setting. A man, his daughter, and his partner are traveling when in California. They cross paths with a group of Satanist witches. Their goal? To sacrifice local kids and transfer their witchy souls into them so that these witches and servants of Satan can live forever. Who else feels Agatha Harkness from WandaVision isn't as evil anymore? The movie begins with smoldering human remains at the site of a car crash, which will make body horror fans happy, I suppose. Oh, and if you like creepy dolls that come alive, there's that as well. So, what happens in the end? We know the parents, including our protagonist's dad, Ben Holden, will try to save the children, but how do they fail? What instruments are the witches using? And does this movie have a priest too, because it's satanic horror and is a must-have in the genre? Well, whether that's there or not is something you'll find out when you watch this film, which fans have called interesting, disconcerting, and well made with effective horror, despite the low-budget vibes it gives. So what's next? A hydration break and a new horror to visit. Of course, this time we have for you 1976's To the Devil, a Daughter. Why are there so many possessed young girls in this genre? Maybe someone should do a feminist analysis of it and talk about the 70s understanding of the young woman. Did the hubbub about hysteria play a part? Who knows? But you're not here for a class on literature. You just want to know what happens in To the Devil, a Daughter. And essentially, it's a race against time by one man to save a little girl who's the target of a Satanist cult. He's an American occult researcher straight from the pages of the novel To the Devil, a Daughter by Dennis Wheatley. Here, we have an evil, fallen Catholic priest in this final film produced by Hammer Studios. In this movie, the satanic ritual occurs after a woman who's just given birth is murdered only a few days prior to Halloween. You know what I'm wondering? The girl in this movie, Catherine, is supposed to have been raised in a cult. How accurate is this movie in describing cult lifestyles and especially the place of women in it, especially considering one of the disturbing elements of this movie is sex rituals and the ending, which leaves the fate of Catherine, who's saved, still ambiguous because of the partial demonic baptism she was part of. So, what do fans have to say about this work? Well, they've called it a typical 70s satanic horror film, comparing it to The Exorcist, and others have called it a must-see for horror fans. What side do you fall on? And are you, too, like us, wondering what was so special in the 70s that such an outcropping of satanic horror emerged? Could it be something more than the success of The Exorcist? Well, while you ponder that, let's introduce you to yet another movie. The Mephisto Waltz. Today, most movie buffs, when they hear Mephisto, think of the Marvel antagonist whom we all wanted to see in WandaVision or Multiverse of Madness, but didn't. Yet in this 1971 production, named after a piano piece, we're looking at a more satanic version of the character, even if the actual Mephisto never makes it to the set. The story is simple, if extremely twisted. Basically, father-daughter duo Duncan and Roxanne carry out a satanic ritual to transfer Duncan's consciousness into the body of Miles as Duncan is dying. At first, Miles' wife Paula notices the change, but is unbothered. But after their daughter Abby dies, and then her love Bill, who is also Roxanne's ex, she realizes there's been a deal with Satan and her husband is gone. Now, here is where the disturbing bit comes in. Trigger warning. After Duncan's reluctant child murder, Paula decides no matter who the man is, she wants to be with her husband. What does she do? She uses the satanic ritual to take over Roxanne's body so that she can be with Duncan/Miles. Incest is a huge part of satanic horror, it seems, which makes sense because it's a social taboo and will make people feel a little bit ick. And as for what fans think of this, a critic agrees that the movie didn't take the magic seriously enough, which was the fatal flaw for this film, making it more like a parody of horror than true horror, since anyone can get access to the ritual and become a Satanist. Yet, the plot has promise, so we have to rely on you, dear viewer, to tell us whether this is worth a watch or not. Now, the next work takes us to the start of the 70s with The Dunwich Horror. Were you expecting an adaptation of Lovecraftian horror in this list? Because that's exactly what the Dunwich Horror is, an adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's story of the same name. Now, Lovecraftian horror is usually cosmic horror. Think Cthulhu, and the movie doesn't disappoint, even if it is decidedly more about the character of Nancy and her troubles. One thing you need to know before going into the movie is that it's not very satanic at first glance, because the evil is the old ones, demons and pagan rituals, perhaps speaking to our nature as humans to see what is different as bad. Anyway, the story is simple and hits many of the beats satanic horror is known for, including a woman being impregnated with an Antichrist figure. The movie follows Nancy, who's taken by Wilbur to the town of Dunwich under hypnosis, despite many, including the townsfolk, warning her against the man. Her friend Elizabeth and her professor come to rescue her, but accidentally unleash a monster upon the town, which is Wilbur's twin, while his mother dies in an asylum, labeled insane from a traumatic childbirth. Who wouldn't be a little shell-shocked at giving birth to a demon, though? Seriously, what is it with satanic horror's treatment of women and mental illness? The movie ends with the professor managing to rescue Nancy from a ritual meant to bring back the old ones, which are part of hopes as a reference to the broader cosmic horror Lovecraft is known for. But we, as the audience, know all is not well, for our rescued protagonist is pregnant, and it could be Wilbur's demon baby. Despite fans noting the use of cut lens techniques to give the movie a surreal feel, they've said that the choice of mustaches for the actors takes away from the horror element. Wilbur is obviously shifty, and given it is satanic horror, no one's surprised when, trigger warning, the woman is drugged and worse. So, while there is some gore, the movie is more for the Lovecraftian fans than anyone else, in our opinion. But we think you should watch it. Cosmic horror has a way of providing catharsis, in our opinion, and it also has you jumping at every noise. If only we could get some horror without the misogyny, though. That'd be nice. Any recommendations? Let us know in the comments what we tell you about 1972's Daughters of Satan. Finally, a work where women aren't impregnated against their will, but do they have agency? No, this is a horror movie that women will get, because it's all about someone else taking over their bodies and making them do things they don't want to atone for the past. Sounds a lot like lived reality, but then many do say what men think is horror is simply being a woman. Moving on, let's talk about the two lovers, a married couple who are at the center of this story, the wife Chris and her husband James. The plot is essentially that James's ancestor killed witches at the stake, and now they've come to take revenge on subsequent generations of the family, and unfortunately one of the women who are chosen to enact the revenge is Chris, James's wife. It begins with a painting where James notices one of the witches at the stake looks eerily like Chris, and then other characters from the painting begin to appear in their life, trying to help Chris fulfill her destiny. They even punish her for failing to kill James, and all his investigation seems to lead to deaths of the people involved, until the three witches apparently push him off a bridge. Then Chris comes back to herself and returns home to find James has escaped the murder plan. Things look to be settling in for a happy ending, until the painting acts up again and a tearful Chris kills herself. For romance enthusiasts, this would be the saddest thing ever. Were women the target audience for this movie? Let us know if fans can tell us that. Well, they can't at first glance, but what they can say is that this movie was a cheesy satanic horror film with all the right props, such as the robes and whips, dungeons and more. What do you think of it? Have you seen it, or are you going to? And who thinks a marathon of this should be followed by Why Women Kill next? Though please don't unalive your spouses. This has been a PSA. Moving on, we've now reached the penultimate movie on the list, which is 1972's Something Evil. A haunted house. A mother worried for her children. That's what this movie is about, when a married couple moves into a sweet country house that's haunted and eventually causes the mother to believe they need to leave and that she's accidentally become a danger to her kids. Until she's told where the real danger is. That is, her possessed son is also there. This movie's poster is enough to give me nightmares, but it's a must-watch because Spielberg worked on it. And boy, does the Jaws director do a good job on what a fan critic called a cheap, forgotten TV flick, which cashes in on the idea of a horror book explaining and documenting everything that's about to happen to the characters. And now we're on to the final breach. We've come to the last movie for today. Don't Deliver Us from Evil, 1971. Just writing that title has me praying that I am delivered from evil. But what's the movie about? Let's explore. This movie is disturbing, which makes sense given that it's loosely based on a real-life murder. It follows two Catholic girls who turn more and more evil, marry Satan, and murder a man. They say it's because he tried to, trigger warning, do sexual acts with them without consent. But some disagree because in the movie they strip to their underclothes to entice him. Perhaps that makes it even more disturbing, as do their ages. Scared they'll be caught, they kill themselves in front of their entire school and parents. Man, just writing this has me wanting to read a comic book and cleanse my brain. Perhaps hearing what other fans have to say will make all of us feel more at ease. Well, it turns out the movie, despite its great acting, is low on gore. Could this movie have been better? Well, according to a fan critic, yes, but we feel that it's a deeper reflection of how uncomfortable this movie can make a viewer. What do you think? While you ponder, let's present you with our parting note. Yep, it's time for a Marvelous review. While some say that there's no cookie-cutter horror in the 70s, others will disagree and say that The Exorcist set the tone for what horror would look like in that decade. And sure, possessed girls, satanic horror, and other such elements became popular, but The Exorcist didn't invent the genre. And while there are some tropes repeated in almost every movie, including the problematic treatment of women and girls, this genre does have much to offer us as viewers. What's your favorite horror movie? And is it satanic horror? Let us know in the comments while we direct you to a video about Night Gallery, which is sci-fi horror. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.